right. Well, I'm from Bear, and Bear likes to show. We want to let you know about our company. So I've got a few slides here. I'm not really going to talk about them. You can read much faster than I can talk, and so I'm going to let you look at these sort of things. So these are some of the numbers with the corporation that I work with. We do a lot of business in the world in many different places, not just with pharma, but also with crop science. So in crop science, this was acquired by Bayer, and we have now we're number one in the world in most of the categories of seed production and crop science and crop protection. There, enough about them. So my name's Darin Powell, and you can see there that that's my long title. But basically, what I am is I'm a bit of an oddball, not just because of the jacket, but I am also person, and my main focus of my job is to figure out digital transformation strategy, and especially in terms of implementing it and actually understanding and measuring how it's working or how it's not working and those sort of things. Trying to be smart about where we put our digital assets and our money at the same time. So I wanted to put a few slides in here about digital transformation, right? So a lot of the times when people talk about digital transformation, you've heard a lot about MES and digital transformation today, and it's about, we talk about it as a technical and effort, technical transformation, and that's the easy part. That's the easy part to measure. How many of our applications are on the cloud, right? That sort of thing. You can do those sort of things, but honestly, it's also a business transformation. We've heard those discussions too. You know that this is a fundamental disruption of your business. When you're going from one state of work to another state of work, it's always going to be a fundamental change. The part that most people don't talk about in digital transformation, though, is this: people and culture. So we build beautiful things, right? My background is in IT. I was an IT architect and a business architect. And now a business partner, and then into what I do today. And so IT, what IT is it's a manufacturer. IT can manufacture anything that you want, right? If you want a coffee table, IT can make you one. If you want a car, IT can make you one. Give us the specs, and we'll make you tools. However, when we give you those tools, how you use them, or whether they're appropriate for you, it's nothing that IT can do about that. And so the problem is that if you think of digital transformation simply from that technical piece and that business piece, then you're missing a component, and that is that people and culture. So why and so here's the two, for the purposes of this talk, here are the two definitions for the terms that we are going to be using. That way you can keep things straight when I'm speaking. So here's the problem. I was asked these questions in 2018 from leadership, and so we were looking at this. I guess it was 2019. I don't know. The years all blur together. What with COVID, right? But so how do we know that we're succeeding? How do we know that what we're doing is right? How can we leverage all of the stuff that we've done in the past? Because if you're a company that's in this business and you've been doing different things, you've been actually implementing solutions for probably the entirety of your career in one way or another. How do we know what was really successful and what wasn't? Is it what's sticking around today, or is it what's being used today? Or do you have a bunch of different applications and things that are hanging around, that I call them zombie applications, right? They're hanging around with nobody using them, and you're paying for it. So leadership wanted to know why their other efforts to do this didn't produce results when they tried to bring in transformational stuff. And so I was given that because of my background in business architecture and because of the fact that I think a little bit differently than most people. Yep, I'd go backwards, for example. So I created I created a tool and I appropriated a tool for helping with product supply in this particular field. The first one that I'm going to talk a little bit about is this digital maturity index. So when you went out there in 2019, when you went on the web and tried to find measuring tools for digital maturity, you would find many different kinds. But they were all about process. What's your digital maturity of your account receivables process? What's the digital maturity of your packaging process? You know, those sort of things. But one of the things that they all were missing was this cultural component. And so we created this tool where we have this cultural, informational maturity, and technical maturity, and then each of them have those subcomponents. For example, strategic maturity was something that we weren't even really considering at that time. They were only thinking about things from the business standpoint. So what this tool was developed for is it was developed in order to assess organizational and leadership levels. So this is the people that are making decisions, the people that have the vision and understanding where they are in that curve. So that's great, right? So now you know what your leadership thinks. Okay, so what's real? What's happening today? We understand because leadership lives in the future. It doesn't necessarily live in the present, right? We're doing strategy. And you don't strategize for today, you strategize for tomorrow. So how do we measure the way things are so that we know that our strategy is going to be applicable moving forward? You can't know where you're going unless you know where you are. It's an old adage, but it's true. So we looked at this, and we have this tool that we use right now called the Plant Readiness Assessment, and it's called PRA. So what the Plant Readiness Assessment is we classify it as a conversation. And it's a conversation to try to understand the plant and for the plant to understand themselves. Because oftentimes, a lot of times we would tell the plant that we're going to give them new stuff, that they're going to get new stuff, that we'd lay stuff on them without really talking to them, right? One plant, let's say this plant over in Germany has this really wonderful inventory management system that, okay, great, it's great, it's wonderful, let's implement it across the board. Well, you go to LATAM and it falls apart because it's a different culture and it's a different ways of working and all these other things, which I'm sure you found out in different things across your experiences. So what the Plant Readiness Assessment is for us and what it's doing for us is that we are looking at how in the world we're going to fuel these different pieces of digital transformation. And I got to put on my glasses because I can't read and I don't want to turn my back to you. So basically, what we do is we use the Plant Readiness Assessment and its goal and its measures in there to help fuel all of our site roadmaps across the board. Now the Plant Readiness Assessment, which we're going to talk about here in a second, I'll get into the pieces of that. And you can read that. I don't need to read that for you, of course. But basically it was a tool that was developed outside, and I touch on that as well. But it's a way for us to go into each individual plant and understand where they are from the perspective of where their manufacturing execution is, where their support is, where their people are, where their solutions are, etc. And what we get out of that is that we take the data that we get from there, and we have this thing called this plant readiness matrix. So we have there's two axes on that. One is technical and one is cultural. And so it's not necessarily true that you want to be straight in the middle, as you can see here. But basically, we wanted to find out where each of our plants are in the globe on this chart. And there's a reason for that, because right now we didn't really know how mature each one of these 127 plants were. And honestly, we had favorite plants that we would take stuff to, that we would go to test and go to pilot, and they were suffering from pilot overload. We would take it to a place, they'd look at it and they'd say, oh, it's just like the thing we had last year, or we already have one in place that's better than this because we know it and we like it. Those are the kind of things that we really didn't want to do. But it would give wide scale visibility as to where everybody was on the same measure. So I want to talk a little bit about the tool that we derive from this tool, or the thing that we made. The Bioforum tool they made something called this digital plant maturity model, and it was made specifically for pharma. And it's actually quite good. It's something that we used in our pharma piece, in our pharma side, or our division, but it didn't really quite fit with crop science because it was focusing on the parlance of pharma. There were things like testing patients and things like that, which we just don't have in crop science. So what we did was, the wonderful thing in this tool is that you can change it a bit. You can change some of the wording and stuff to make your to make your point. You can add questions and such like that. Don't delete questions because all of them are relevant, but you can make them into ways that you as a user can better, or you as an assessor can better explain what you're looking for in each of these different questions. And so we did that. It didn't translate very well at the beginning. It took a few times, but we did it. So when you do the scoring, you can see here, this is the digital plant maturity models scoring. We kept the same sort of thing. And you can see that we have what they call the business capabilities here. Those are the things that are actually physically happening within the plant. And then you have what are the enabling capabilities there as well, with people, business, et cetera. And it's done through straight averaging and such like that. But basically what this allows us to do is it allows us to start to see and discover across the company where our strengths and where our weaknesses were. Because now we're comparing apples to apples. Before, we weren't at all. So I want to talk a little bit here about this plant readiness matrix. And so when you look at this, you can see down there in the lower left-hand corner, there's an outlier. And that plant right there is a plant that actually is in a country where where manual labor is very cheap. So they know, and also the internet is strictly controlled by the government. So the trust for digital and the fact that they do manual entry makes them low on both of those different axes, right? So we have the technical axis on the left and the cultural one at the bottom. And so what we found was that there's a distribution across these things that is quite interesting. So we don't have a lot where you have in that upper left quadrant education, and what that means is that those are plants that they have a high degree of technical advancement but a low degree of cultural. And what that means is that you may have a lot of technical equipment that's not being used. So my favorite discussion there was that we went to a plant and we discovered that they had a video teleconferencing room, state of the art. And they had put it in 2 years before we got there, and they had never used it because they preferred to be on a speakerphone in a conference room. So what that says is that, okay, you're highly technical. I mean, yeah, you're highly technical, but from a cultural standpoint, maybe we should tell you a little bit. But the education part of that may not be the plant. Maybe what the education was, we never should have given them a video conferencing conference room in the first place. So somebody's going to learn something about it on that particular aspect. And the lower right now is something that I think is really one of the big pieces of this, and I'll talk about it a little bit when we start talking about proactive change management. But basically, when we would pilot things, we would pilot them at favorite sites. So they would be places where we had innovated before. A lot of the times it would be, this site was really cutting edge 10 years ago. But we really got into, and so we started giving them all the stuff to do, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem with that is that people get set. When you have an advanced, say you have an MES in place, right? Let's say that we have Rockwell at a place and we want something different than Rockwell. Not saying that Rockwell's bad, but they will automatically, when you ask them about an MES, they'll think about it in terms of Rockwell. And if you go and you start to compare things specifically on the tech stack, then you start to lose objectivity, and you have to understand what an advancement might give you. And so, what we do then is that when we look at this, when you want to find places to pilot new and emerging technologies, what you really want to find is you want to find plants that have a high culture maturity. So these are plants that are in places where they almost exclusively use devices. They'll use IoT, they'll use whatever's available to them. They'll use like Yammer for communication. They'll use all these different new things that are around in order to get their work done. But you want them with relatively low technical. So these are plants that maybe have not gotten into the automation maturity curve for one reason or another. A lot of the times we'll find that in packaging and filling plants, for example, where they would take our product and put it into packaging, those sort of things. But what makes them so unique and so wonderful to start to pilot things in is because they're hungry for something new, they're hungry for this innovation, and they are able to then really give that pilot a fair shot. Oftentimes we would take our pilots into the most difficult place that we could to have success, which is completely the opposite of what we want. We want to give each of our pilots the best chance possible to be successful. And so you need to find fertile ground in order to plant that. And this is what has given us a bit to start to look at these places where we've never really considered running pilots and giving them a shot. And it's working in some of the small, we haven't done it with a large one just yet, but it's working in the smaller initiatives that we've tried. So here you can see what our I didn't save my changes for 2022. So we've now measured over 70 different plants across the board. We have over 6,000 data points right now from all those different things. We put it into 4 regions, 5 languages, and all these different things. So we did confirm this value to digital manufacturing, and as a matter of fact, the results that we got out of this has really started to drive our digital manufacturing strategies. So we're using this now as a way of not just helping us to strategize, but also to help the plants themselves to understand where they are, where they need to be. And so I need to speak to that for a second. And you heard me in this last presentation that was here to talk about value in digital transformation. And I can't emphasize enough how much and how important it is that digital transformation only makes sense if it promotes value. And trying to have that conversation with management sometimes is tough, because basically they want it. You know, they look at that, they say this is going to, you know, bring us into the 21st century, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But the problem is that you can end up spending a lot of money and not get a lot of value back from it. And most of the time, that upper management, most of the time they'll listen to the money argument. You start to give them a price tag versus a value given, they'll listen to that. Sometimes they won't. And I was just speaking in this thing across the hall, I was saying that a lot of the times as we are business people, we are production engineers, we are IT professionals, we aren't really taught how to sell things. We're not really taught how to convince people on what the right path is. And so it's difficult for us sometimes to make those changes and to help speaking truth to power. So I have to emphasize that one of the good things about this is that we have individuals that are unafraid to do that can do that can actually influence power, and you have to be able to find those people to do that. So anyhow, so our challenges you can see there, we did have to make it all virtual within 1 year. It was meant to be a face-to-face, and I still to this day believe, maybe it's because I may or may not belong to a certain generation, but I do think that in-person is better than virtual in several ways, but definitely when it comes down to back and forth discussion and sharing of ideas and such like that. But since we couldn't do that, we had to completely virtualize that, and we did it. But luckily, now that COVID is starting to fade, knock on wood, we are able to get back into the factories and start to have those face-to-faces again. So that is a description of the tools that we developed, why we developed them. I got to get used to them not being in a presentation at work, because I was about to ask for questions and I should probably finish the presentation first. So I want to talk about proactive change management. So this thing, when you looked at that matrix, it tells a couple of things. It tells where you are technically, it tells where you are culturally. So if we have any change managers in the room, what change management follows is this. It's an ADKAR methodology. And it's awareness, desire, knowledge, etc. You can read that. And so basically what we choose, or what we have been doing, and a lot of people do with change management is a reactive thought most of the time from IT, from other people. We say, okay, we're creating the next best thing. Oh, we've created the next best thing. Oh, wait, we have to implement it, and that people are going to have to use it, so now we talk to the change managers. And that's wrong. If you start to go and you're looking at implementing things, if you're implementing change and doing change, you must engage change managers at the very beginning before it's made, not just after the fact. And the reason for this is that if your change management organization is as hooked into it as it should be, they will know what the pain of the users are and what sort of roadmaps or roadblocks that you're going to find along the way. And that's very beneficial information for you guys, because what it will do is that when you look at developing this next best thing, you'll be able to then start to counteract what it is that's going to be the problems in implementation while you're writing the program. It also allows the change managers to start to prepare the field. So this idea of proactive change management is here. So what it allows us to do in change management is it allows us to start to prepare the field. I'm sorry about all these agriculture terms. Starts us to prepare the petri dish, maybe. I don't know. But so and we can go across all of the different plants at certain levels of technical and at certain levels of cultural, and we can start to give them the knowledge, the change preparation, and things that they would need for multiple different initiatives. So at some level, there is commonality to advancement that happens that you can really go and you can work with folks to kind of get them along the way. And at the same time, I'm a big fan of this communication stream being both ways. At the same time, you can also ascertain how open are they to these sort of things, and we can start to gain that kind of introspection as well. So here you can read. This is some of the stuff that we use this PRA data for. They're key enablers and such like that to help us. So that's one of the things that we're using this sort of data for. So what okay, let's see what my next one, there. So basically when you look at this sort of thing, you can group certain people together. I've already covered that. I went out of my own cadence. I guess it's late in the day and it's St. Patrick's Day, so my mind's on something else. But anywho, I think that what I would like you to take away from this is that there are tools out there that you can do this with today in your own plants. That digital plant maturity model that BioForm created is free. It's nothing you have to pay for. You can go out to them and you can look at it on their site, and you can actually go into your plants and assess it. And it's a generic thing to use across pharma. That doesn't mean that you can't add your own terminology onto it if you happen to be in a specific form of manufacturer, like medical devices, for example, versus vaccines or something along this line. But I would highly recommend that you go out, you look at that tool. I would think about things from a people and culture standpoint that you can actually put in to help with your own cultural questions in terms of what your preparation for change. A lot of the things that we put in were things like how much do you trust your information on the internet? How much do you trust how often do you actually save your information in your business? You have SharePoint that you save information to. How often do you back that up on your laptop? I do that a lot. I created a digital maturity model and tests that I don't do very well on in some spots because of who I am and what I grew up in. I'm a man of the 80s, and those things weren't that well that time, so I'm stuck. But I would say for us, for you guys, look at where you can develop your tools, and I would be more than happy to help if you guys have questions or anything of that nature, more specifics to what you get. Of course, I can only give so much, but that is, I believe, that is it. So I've got 5 minutes left for questions, if we have any. I have to tell you, I mean, after a day of learning, of hearing about MES and having a presentation that didn't mention MES once, I think that was probably a shocker. But, here.
I don't know. Shall I say thank you not for mentioning MES? Or
Yeah.
We're all tired.
No, I mean MES is also about digitalization, of course. Yeah?
Yes.
And is it something that you're doing on a regular basis, or is it something that you're doing just once in order to decide on the digitalization journey, or are you going whatever? Is there a plan that you are, let's say, doing that assessment
That's a great question.
annually or whatever?
Yeah, so what we did these as a baseline,
Yeah.
and then there's so we have a organization that's about continuous improvement and excellence. So they're lean organization. What we do is that they do these checks they call health checks, and they do that often at the plant. So it's done at least once every 2 years. Plus there's a single a check-in every year. And what we're doing is we are doing our updates to the PRA via that mechanism. So we've hooked ourselves into there, because when you're in a plant, when you're doing these things from corporate, no plant wants to have 16 visits from corporate in a year. They just let us get our work done, will you please?
At Novartis, I learned that depends on the location.
Yeah, right. And so this way we limit the number of touches that we do, but we still get that data. So we're getting it in presently every 2 years. We're hooking into the single year, but we only really concentrate on the things that they concentrated on. So for example, if they scored a certain number in, let's say, material management, and they really have done nothing to improve that, or it might even be at its top, right? It maybe you're as advanced as you need to be in that particular activity. Then we don't talk to them about it.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
Yeah. May I allow a follow-up question?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Do you allow a follow-up question?
Sure.
I mean, we implemented something similar, and we failed a little bit with that because, and it was a long time ago at Novartis. So the thing was that it became kind of a punishment tool. So I mean, you have all that traffic light colors, yeah. And then if management is going to see red, they say, okay, instead of seeing the need for improvement, they saw, well, there's something going wrong.
Exactly, and that.
How do you conquer that? I mean, how do you avoid this?
Well, that's part of the reason why we call it a conversation, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, that was one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we went there. And the first thing that we did was we said, okay, plants, this is not going to be used for any kind of a decision. We're not gauging on how well you're doing anything. All we're doing is we're gauging the capability that you have. That's the first thing. But also, we sold it to them. We told them in ways that it's advantageous to them. So you have to ask for LRP, for money, every year for your plant. You want money in order to improve things within your plant. You have to ask for it from corporate. You have to get that budget. You have to create cases for doing that sort of thing. What the PRA will do is it gives you that kind of ammunition. So for example, if we show through this tool that your OEE is behind where it should be for your class of plant, that gives you the opportunity to ask for the money for that. It's not a question on whether or not you had the control over it, or it's something that is a performance-based indicator. It's not. It basically will tell us as a company where we can have our most efficient spend. Why are we going to take somebody from a level 4 to a level 5 in something when we have somebody down here that's deficient in something as critical as OEE or heaven forbid, production control? So that's what we went in to talk to them about, and that we presented it as, and we got very enthusiastic participation on most of these things because that's what the plants want. They have to make their own case a lot of the time for things, and this gives them the opportunity to have actual data that backs it up, a third party.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Any other questions for Darin?
I think it's shell shock. I think that everybody's
wrap.
just done.
All right.
We're just done.
All right. Thank you very much, Darin.
All right, thanks, guys.
Excellent.